This is part two then of our language and perception lesson related to the Radiolab's colors episode. So here we'll see how we might uh, attempt to model what's going on in the brain when language is somehow influencing perceptual processes, in this case of color. And you recall from Boroditsky's work that she was using shades of blue because Russian speakers have two different terms for light and dark shades of blue, whereas English speakers do not. For this example on the brain here, we're going to stick with English speakers, and instead of variations of blue, we'll do the blue-green distinction. So we have two different concepts, two different terms for blue and green. So let's see what it would mean for the language system to somehow influence perception. So like the Boroditsky task setup, let's imagine here's going to be our first stimulus. It's in visual cortex here, and that was it's a blue tile, blue square that we saw. And the visual system then is going to activate the concept blue, and of course we have a word associated with that concept as well. The idea, though, is that once the concept is activated, it can feed back. It can feed back on the perceptual system. So there's a kind of reverberating activity here, and these different brain areas are communicating with each other. And that feedback processing will be an important part of the story here for why it is that having different concepts might be influencing perceptual processes. So here's the first square. Now along comes the two that we have to choose, right? So the left and the right. Well, one of them is a match. It's a blue one. The other one was the green one. And the suggestion is that the fact that these two here are going to be activating different concepts, right? The blue one will be activating the same concept that was just previously activated, but the green one will be activating a different concept. That fact of two different concepts being activated is enhancing the discrimination between these tiles. That's the argument, that because we have two separate concepts, the feedback from the conceptual areas of the brain to the perceptual areas of the brain, that feedback is enhancing the discrimination of the two. And with enhanced discrimination of these two tiles, we get faster reaction time. So the way we set it up here, because the stimuli activate different concepts, feedback signals cause greater perceptual discrimination, and so the two are perceived as more different, leading to faster response time. Now that would be in contrast to the scenario here, where the first tile would be green, and then the two choices are also within the green category for English speakers, just different shades of green. But the idea then would be, because the two here are activating the same concept of green, that feedback process is not increasing the discrimination of those two stimuli. And as a consequence, they are perceived as, in a sense, less different, leading to a slower response time. So because the two here are activating just one concept, green, then the language system is not helping to discriminate those two, and as a consequence, this task is slower. People are slower performing this task than when the stimuli are in two different color categories. So in summary then, one way to think about what words do is words kind of function like little attentional pointers. And so we've been using this expression, they carve our experiences. If we think of the world as filled with all kinds of objects, with all kinds of details and variations, for example, color, but if we just think of animals in nature, there's all kinds of variations between animals and within what we would call species. What words do then is sort of highlight certain variations over others, right? So words are going to be carving up all that variation that is out there in the world. Words set up boundaries, right? Category boundaries. So a whole bunch of that variation gets lumped into one group, and then we have a word that that refers to those things, and then a whole bunch of other things with slightly different variations or details get lumped into another group, and we have a different word. So words are carving up our experience. And so we can think of that as a kind of attentional process, in a sense, because once we have the words are going to facilitate our perceptual processing of the world. We'll be able to see a bunch of objects as objects of a certain category, and these other objects in a different category. And so it enhances the discrimination between objects, and that is one of the functions of an attention system. Long ago, in the late 1800s, a psychologist by the name of William James wrote an influential textbook on psychology, and he addresses this possibility that language may be influencing our perception of the world. And he uses the example of wine tasting to make his point. If you are familiar with experts in wine tasting, there are many, many different kinds of words that they use to describe different tastes. So you can talk about how a wine maybe has, you can taste different kinds of fruit, or the oakiness or smoky, or maybe it has a velvety texture, or it has a long finish, or all kinds of different descriptive terms for tasting wines. So what we'll do is we'll imagine, let's just say 9 dimensions of taste here. And this Merlot here maybe has 1, 2, 3, and 5, and 6. It has those elements of taste as part of the Merlot experience, but the Burgundy has taste 3, 5, 6, and 8. Now notice, though, the Burgundy and the Merlot, while they overlap, some of the tastes are present in both wines. They are unique. So taste element number 1 is only found in the Merlot, and the Burgundy has taste 6 not found in the Merlot. Now, James argues that what happens is that when we become experts here, and we learn to associate a certain pattern of tastes as a Merlot and a certain pattern of tastes as a Burgundy, that conceptual distinction ends up enhancing the difference in our taste experience. So here's a quote: "The names differ far more than the flavors and help to stretch these latter farther apart." Right? So there's a lot of overlap in the actual physical taste, but because we have the concepts, right, that we're experienced wine tasters, because we have made this conceptual distinction, these similar tastes can be drawn farther apart, made more distinctive, because we have linguistic terms that discriminate between these two kinds of wines. So we think we would taste the difference. Imagine a novice, right, drinking that. We think we would taste the difference even without the ability to name or identify them. But the difference is, and here again James is quoting, "made to seem more substantial by recognizing the terms." So again, he's arguing that if you are experienced and have made this conceptual distinction, this distinction in language, that then means that when you drink these wines, the tastes will be more different because you've got this linguistic distinction set up in your brain.